You're live.
All righty. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Thank you so much for joining our meeting today as we're going to talk about very important topic of HR. But before we get started, I want to turn it over to Cheryl. Would you like to talk about any chamber house rules, things that we need to know about before our meeting starts? And will this be your last meeting with us, Cheryl?
More than likely, yes.
Oh.
It'll all be fine and dandy. Everybody will be doing just fine without me. So today for the business development meeting, there's a couple of things we just want to go over as our presenters are making their topical speeches. We would like for you to mute yourself. There will be a time after the presentation is over for you to ask questions. So keep your questions in mind, or if you're watching us live on Facebook, post them in the comments section. And that way we'll funnel those questions back up to the presenters as we go along. That's all I've got, Kiana.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're definitely going to miss you, Cheryl. So this is a very sad day for us. Okay, so we do have some different faces, a few faces that have joined us on our actual Zoom, and most of everybody else will be on our Facebook Live. So excluding our panelists, we want to just introduce our other guests. So we'll go down the line. We have Miss Jacqueline, and I can't read your last name, but if you would introduce us and let us know who you are and what organization you represent.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me fine? My name is Jacqueline Webb, and I am from San Jacinto College, and I'm the Mathematics Department Chair at the South Campus. And this is my first meeting for the Pearland Chamber of Commerce. I am very excited because I actually joined, I would say, the month of March, and that was 2020, March 2020, and that's when exactly we had the pandemic. And I wasn't able to actually join any meetings, or I was really sad. And then I was just talking with, who is the person that I talked to? Emily, I think it's Emily. And I said, I really am ready. I wanted to start joining meetings and volunteer. So again, the committee that I wanted to join was this one. So nice to meet you, everybody. And let me know if you need any kind of volunteers for this committee. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you, Jacqueline. I feel so honored that this is your first meeting, that you joined our meeting. We definitely need volunteers with our effort, our entrepreneurial efforts. So definitely, if you don't mind putting your information in the chat, I'd like to take it. So very nice to meet you. And we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. And Chair was the one that actually sent me all the information in order for me to join this particular meeting. Thank you, Cheryl. And I'm sad that we're not going to be able to, I mean, are you going to be in other efforts with the Pearland Chamber of Commerce?
Actually, I'm phasing out. That's what I'm calling it today.
We're trying to hold on to her.
But thank you so much for the information, because very easy. Sometimes whenever you want to join a Zoom meeting, it doesn't happen. And it was very easy for me with the link and everything. Thank you, Cheryl.
That's good. It's a good segue to introduce Tony, because she's heading up this committee then.
Awesome. Tony.
Good morning, guys. My name is Tony Vale. I'm here, Vice President of Business Retention and Entrepreneurism here with the Chamber. And I promise, Ms. Jacqueline, I will maybe not be able to fill totally Cheryl's shoes. That's a big ticket to punch, but I will definitely do my best. Anything I can help you with and support, of course, I am willing and able always. Good morning, and I'm so excited to be here.
And thank you, Tony. You have been an asset, just right coming in. And so I appreciate your help that you've helped me with this committee. And we have Miss Amanda.
Hi, everyone.
My name is Amanda Delejandro from Community First Emergency Room. This is actually my second business development meeting. I believe I did it back in maybe March, April with Tess. Tess is usually with y'all, but she couldn't join today, so I'm taking her place just for today. So thank y'all for having me, but I am from Community First Emergency Room, and I am a business development from there.
Awesome. And we know you ladies have been out in the community, and we thank you so much for coming into the Pearland community and providing such a valuable service. Okay, so we're going to go right into our meeting. But before we start firing away with questions to our panelists, I would like for each of them to give an overview of who they are and kind of their background as it pertains to HR and training and development. So we'll start with Miss Ann. And also, I know, Ann, you're with the chamber, so talk about that as well.
Sure, I'll do the quick one first. I am the chairman of the board of directors for the Pearland Chamber this year. And my paying job is that I am a certified HR consultant. I own my own company called Struhall and Associates, and I do work with predominantly smaller companies, usually less than 100-man groups. My background has always been in HR and my adult training, my adult life in the world. And I started out with a company that was a retail operation, retail and manufacturing, and grew that business. It was a family-owned business into multiple sites, was the HR director. So the whole gamut of everything from taking a mom and pop business to multiple locations within Texas, and what that entails, not only from an HR perspective, but how technology fits into that also. After about 16 years at that company, I left for a bigger and more challenging job. I was the VP of HR Communications for JP Morgan Chase in downtown Houston. So I went from a company with about 250 employees when I left to about 80,000 when I joined Chase in 97. And that was encompassing of everything with the call center. And I had a team that managed the script that the call center reps used with working with in-house employees. So did that and that job kind of morphed into many different things, not just reviewing everything that went out to employees. And we built a website when internet sites were coming up and were the trend for companies. I left there in 2009, went back to school and got my MBA in HR at University of Houston Clear Lake, and started my own consulting company, because after experiencing the small family-owned business and seeing that grow, and then the tenure I had in corporate America and everything that's available at that level of HR that smaller companies could use, I realized that that's where I really have a passion for, is helping the smaller business. If it's a plumber or a dentist or whoever that is, they're experts and subject matter experts in their particular industry. They don't necessarily know the ins and outs of hiring and firing and managing employees and training their employees. And so that's where I come in and help those companies with their policies and procedures and training that's needed, and workforce commission issues, and you name it. So I tease, I say I go from hire to fire, and we try to keep the fire at the lower level.
Awesome. We are very well accomplished, and we're thankful, one, to have you as our chair of the board for the Pearland Chamber, but to have you as a member of the chamber and the Pearland community. We're just so very thankful having you. We know that you're a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for joining our panel. Okay, we have Mr. Jonathan James.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jonathan James, and I work in learning and development, learning and organizational development. My career in HR has primarily been on what they refer to as the HRD, or human resource development side of things. So I've worked in a variety of industries, from oil field service industry to manufacturing of equipment for oil field uses and production and drilling services. And now I'm currently in the chemical manufacturing industry, for an organization that is headquartered in Brazil, but manufactures plastics for various purposes, for medical purposes, for food packaging, and different uses. And they had a lot of work and a lot of contributions to the pandemic situation when they were supporting healthcare workers by manufacturing the resources they need. My career has been focused on trying to get the most out of individuals, helping them reach their potential for their individual and organizational contributions. And this has been through learning as well as training functions and supporting their development. And also looking at organizations and trying to understand and help them be more efficient in how they do things, be more efficient and effective in their training and their approaches. So I've been doing this for a number of years, and similar to Ann, looking at small businesses and supporting small businesses is a passion as well, because there are so many things, there's so many resources that larger corporations have and they're aware of, but many of your smaller or medium-sized organizations, they just aren't aware of, and they don't know the advantages or disadvantages that come when you do or don't engage in development activities with your employees. So very passionate about that, happy to share what I know and happy to continue to learn, because things sometimes change, trends of course come and go, and it's helpful to help other individuals, especially your small business owners, be on the forefront of that and help them understand those things.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you guys don't know, Jonathan kind of moonlights as my husband or spouse. Okay, so this is going to just be an open discussion between our panelists and those that have joined the actual Zoom. If you have questions or comments, want to chime in, that's fine. There's a raise hand, or, just unmute yourself. But we're going to get started. First of all, when we talk about HR, human resources, what really is HR and why is that important? So we'll start off with Ann.
Get myself unmuted there. So, wow, that's a loaded question. HR, human resources, human capital, those terms are used kind of interchangeably. And it's just, you have a company or you work for a company, and the biggest asset you have, I think, really is your employees. And so with the experience that we've had with the pandemic, that set up a whole new world of how to manage your employees and how to keep your company going. And unfortunately, a lot of companies didn't survive and have not come back from the pandemic. But it opened up a whole can of information and opportunities for companies to think outside the box and how can they help their employees and still have the business be profitable and tap into the financial resources available. So HR definitely is a strategic partner at the table with owners in the upper level, senior level management, because it's, bottom line is going to impact the budget for the company. So you have to look to see where can you get the biggest bang for your buck, whether it's from hiring and really, and I know that we'll probably I think we have another session that will be on the whole hiring process, but looking at that, so it starts from the hiring process and the pre-hiring and looking to see, what type of employee are you looking for? Are you needing someone in-house on site? Are you needing remote workers? And the trend has changed. And Jonathan, I know you can definitely attest to this also, is with multiple generations in the workforce now. So, and having to look to see what does each generation need to keep them engaged in the workforce. Other part of HR, that's from the hiring process. Once you get employees onboarded, how are you going to keep them engaged? And how are you going to keep them compliant with what they need to do? So one of the things that I'm adamant about with all my clients is that whether you've got just a handful of employees or multiple, on up to whatever the number is that you definitely want to document policies and procedures. That way you've got a consistent way of managing your employees. There's less likely of any discrimination or hurt feelings or unfair practices if you can document your procedures, document what your policies are. And I've got several examples of clients that they might have had a handbook, but it wasn't either updated or didn't address some of the critical pieces. And it cost them some time and money because they had some unemployment claims that had they had this information in their handbook, then it would have been a cut and dried unemployment claim that would not have been disputed and have 3 appeals for it. So definitely on that side, and looking to see how are you going to engage your employees from a training and development. They have to have a passion for what they do. They have to see light at the end of the tunnel, what's next for them. So I think that's where Jonathan comes in. I don't do a lot of training and development because I rely on people like Jonathan and his company to delve in to do more customized training or information and development for those companies that need more group work done or want to take their employees to another level. And then, of course, if it comes to the time, we all have employees that we have to let go, whether it's due to lack of business or poor performance. You want to make sure from that aspect that if they've done the training and development and they're still not performing, you want to make sure you're tracking that to see if there's something remiss that's in your programs that needs to be adjusted, or is the employee just not able to perform the job, or have they not complied with other policies and procedures, and making sure that you're compliant in all of that to keep you at less risk of having some wrongful termination come back at you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Jonathan, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Anna was very thorough in terms of the answer of what HR is and what it does. It manages employee related functions, and in many cases the employee experience is defined by HR. Everything from benefits, compensation and benefits, to training, as you mentioned, and especially the policies and procedures aspect of it. It's funny, and for many of us who've worked in HR for a while, we can say that for years there was always this thing about HR trying to have a seat at the table in the larger corporations, trying to be involved in the strategic direction of the company and the organization. And your effective organizations or HR groups are able to do so because they understand what the organization is trying to accomplish, and they help with defining the employee experience to align with those strategic objectives. So a key way, Ann already hit on it, was with the policies and procedures, having those captured and documented in a way that supports the organizational strategic direction, as opposed to, hey, coming in every day and saying, okay, what are we going to do today? Every day looks different. And a number of your small and medium-sized businesses, because they're focused on getting through the next quarter, or in some cases making the next payroll cycle, that's how they function often. They're just thinking about, what's next, or how to get through the next day. And they don't think necessarily in terms of documenting and being prepared for situations when they arise. So an effective HR organization understands how to align strategically with the company and how to support them in that area.
All right. And I think you guys touched on it, how it's so important for small businesses, because a lot of times people think of HR and you think of these big corporate companies. Most time they have the budgets and the funds to hire actual HR people. But a lot of times small businesses don't, and they're constantly in like a firefighting. And so that's why it's important to be connected with people like you, Jonathan, and you, Ann, because if a small company maybe can't afford to go out and hire a full-time HR person, they could at least reach out to a consultant who can still have them in line with what they need to do and what they need to focus on. So it's very, very important. So our next question is talking about HR and training and development, because they're different, but they all kind of merge or fall under HR. So I'll direct this question to start with you, Jonathan. What is the role of HR in training and development?
Well, just like Ann started off on the last question, it's a pretty full or vast question. But when you look at learning and development or training and development in HR, you understand that there are various aspects to it. Training is different from learning. And then you also could have corporate education. But the idea is that training, you're performing or you're imparting skills to employees, and you're helping them to become more effective at their job or what they are doing, and you're helping to grow them. And training and development or organizational development or learning is very much a strategic function. Since we're talking primarily about small and medium-sized businesses, it's helpful to understand that when you engage in this strategic effort, you might not see the results the next hour or the next day. It might take over time or a period. But, and this is a struggle sometimes to get small business owners to understand this, it's still an essential side of what you are trying to do, because organizations typically have low performers and high performers. And if you decide to refrain from engaging in a strategic effort to develop your employees, what typically happens over time is your low performers just exist and your high performers exit. And so it's an essential part when HR can come in and say, hey, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And let's introduce some learning or some training around those skills that you want to develop for your employees. And once again, I know Ann mentioned it, but I'm gonna keep driving it home. The policies and procedures, documenting those along with your training material, whether digital or classic physical version of it, will help you in those training efforts. But without having that documented, inconsistent training can take place across the board. You can have one frontline employee who does things ABC and the other one who goes ABX or ABJ. And then your quality of service, your value, your customer experience is completely different. So HR, an effective HR function can support business owners in all those aspects of things.
Can you give not, it doesn't have to be a real life example, but just in theory, how important training is? Because I know, Jonathan, you've worked and helped out with like safety training. So what would happen if they don't have a good training program in place?
A lot can happen. At worst, you mentioned safety. You could have an incident, and you could have, loss of life, some physical injury, some damage to property. And there's also a situation, as Ann kind of touched on earlier too, liability for an organization, because we didn't have things documented or we didn't have consistent training. And so then that organizational liability falls upon you as the owner or as the company. So there could be a lot of consequences to not effectively or consistently training team members.
Right, correct. So you think of those big companies like your Shells and your Exxons, they have just excellent training programs. They're really focused on safety. In some industries, this could be a life or death thing. So it's very, very important. And in others, it could simply come down to litigation, and it could, by not having an effective training program, it could really put that business out of business. So it's something that you really, really want to focus on. Now, Ann, would you like?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was going to tap onto that because one of my clients is heavy into the oil and gas industry, and they have to send their employees on site with their equipment. And as Jonathan said, it's critical that the safety training be there, because this particular company, they told me, said, look, they are so adamant, and safety is such a high priority for them, that because if they have one incident that's a reportable incident to OSHA, could kick them out of one of the plants for long term. It could be a zero tolerance where they're never allowed back into the plant, depending on the incident. So yeah, it's critical, I think, from the training aspect on this, on what Jonathan was saying, is that, in documenting and making sure you got the consistent training, and you're documenting who's training and when the training was.
Exactly. And so we know that training programs, they really boost employee satisfaction. That's something that employees want. I know when we survey our employees, and that's always something they're asking for, additional training. They want to learn. So it's going to make them happy. It's going to improve retention, and it's going to help them grow. So employees appreciate being able to build new skills, work on their job performance, and even evolve into different challenging roles. So having a good training program is very, very essential to any organization, whether you're small or you're large.
And one other thing I wanted to tap into and touch upon and expand upon what Jonathan said too, about high performers, low performers. In fact, so you have a good training program and a development program. Your high performers are going to stay engaged. They want to grow and to improve. But like I said, if you can't support that, or you can't be fair in bringing up the low performers to a higher level, your high performers are going to leave. And gone are the days to where an employee has tenure with a company and you don't see employees staying the trend is not for an employee to stay 20 or 30 years with one employer anymore. You know, if you can get 5 to 7 years out of an employee staying, that the younger generation coming into the workforce, they are a very fluid, I guess is a good term, fluid in their employment, that they will jump from company to company. And so as long as you can provide something that keeps them engaged, keeps them challenged, they're more inclined to stay there, because retaining an employee, even though you may be paying a little bit more to get some of the training programs put in place and some of the perks that go with that, it's a lot cheaper to put those programs in to retain employees than it is to have a higher turnover and have to, you know, terminate someone and then go through the whole process again of training someone again, you know, 2 years later after you hired the first one. So it really, what you're doing in-house to retain the employees is very critical from a financial perspective also.
Jonathan, did you want to say anything? I know that's a topic you speak of often.
No, I think Ann really captured it. That's, you know, there's nothing else I would add to that, honestly.
Awesome. Okay, so, and you just kind of touched on it, Ann, but why is developing talent the best and cheapest way to staff? So if y'all want to hone in on that just a little bit more.
I'm going to let Jonathan start out with that one.
Well, I think you touched on it there between, you know, when you lose a staff member or lose a team member, the cost of replacing that team member can easily dwarf the effort of investing in them and their growth, their development, and helping them enhance their skills to contribute more to your bottom line. Because when you bring someone else in, then you have to get them acclimated or orientated to your organization, to your organizational culture. I'm not going to go too deep on, you know, models and everything else, but you have your forming, storming, norming, classic Tuckman's model. And the idea is that teams need a while to get together and start contributing together to act in cohesion. So whenever you remove someone from that team, either, you know, voluntary or involuntary, you have to take a step back, and then it takes more time to get people to work together and be in cohesion. So before it gets to that point, before it gets to the point where someone says, hey, this organization is not invested in me, or, you know, this is not a place where I want to see myself in the future, or before it gets to the point where you say this individual just isn't cutting it, they're not performing, et cetera, you first could examine the developing of their talent and their abilities so that they can perform at a higher level, so that they could contribute more, and so that they can feel like, hey, this organization or my supervisor or the owner of the company is interested in growing me. Because when people feel like you are not interested in them or interested in growing their abilities, then their commitment to you as a business owner is it's going to be likewise. Hey, this individual isn't interested in me. Why should I be interested in them? They'll just view it as a job. So it's a very, very, I would say, I know I said the word strategic a number of times, but it's a better approach instead of just viewing it as, hey, for this frontline role or this direct role, we just constantly have turnover and that's just the way it is. Well, it doesn't always have to be like that. If you want to invest in a employee experience and a development experience that could enhance their skills and help them retain or develop affinity for the organization.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan's well said on what that was, you know, and part of it too on the training aspect is not only from a personal perspective, personal development, but also, you know, company information needs to be trained, you know, from a safety aspect, but also what do they need to do? Maybe if they are the lower performance or a mid-level performer, and really trying to increase their performance, because I think one of the trends, and I was reading this, I think it was with one of the SHRM documents that came out, was talking about that companies, after we've experienced the pandemic and remote learning and that all the technology that has come on board, to everyone has access to almost everything, it seems like, electronically now. But the fact that employers, I think, are going to begin to, because they can't necessarily monitor the hours an employee is working. I mean, they can if they've got some of the technology in place that can track that. But I think that companies are going to start looking at, what is your output? What are you producing? You know, are you producing? Is it taking you 3 hours? Or is it taking you 5 hours? I don't think they're focusing so much will be focusing so much on how many hours you're putting in. They want to see, what are you producing? What are your results? And the high performers are going to be able to really crank out the widgets or whatever they're doing a lot faster. And if you've got some poor performers, then you need to make sure that you're doing performance management conversations with them. And it's not just a once a year. You're looking at them, if it's nothing wrong with sitting down monthly with an employer, quarterly, and sit down, make sure you have some development goals set for them. And monitor them, do some checkpoints along the way. Don't wait till just at the end of the year. Oh, I got to go do an employee evaluation, and it's the annual evaluation, and you haven't talked to them all year. There should be no surprises at that performance evaluation if you've been communicating with them throughout the year, and trying to address whatever training and development or issues that need to be addressed, so that you're not waiting at the last minute to deal with something to improve them.
I think that's interesting what you said, especially even on the employer side, because let's say that person is not really performing and there has to be some type of disciplinary or termination. Then you have records, you have documentations of you trying and to work with that person to get them up to a certain level. So there should be no surprises. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Just something that Ann also just said. I think that there's a shift in the mindset of some in the workforce where it's, I'm paid to be present versus I'm paid to produce. Okay. And there's been a number of people for years, for decades, who say, well, I'm paid to, show up here, be at this desk from 8 to 5, and that's that. And whatever comes across my desk, I'll handle it, et cetera. And now the metrics for the evaluations is more on how have you contributed? What have you done? How has it contributed to the overall, either the bottom line or the strategic direction of the organization? And touching on what you said as far as the disciplinary process, this is an area where a number of organizations, I would even venture to say some large organizations, but especially your small, medium organizations, they don't have a consistent documented disciplinary process. Mm-hmm. So when you say, okay, we're going to go from a verbal warning to a written warning to a performance improvement plan, and then whatever comes after that, well, for employee A, they may have went through those steps, and employee B, for the same, discipline or incorrect action, they don't go through those steps. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there are variances to that. If you have an action that was so terrible or so consequential, such as a safety violation or harassment situation, something of that nature, yeah, you can forego some step and get straight to the, another one. But if you have two of the exact same infractions and you don't consistently follow that process, it's once again a liability situation. So these are things that, of course, your small and medium-sized business owners, they're focused on making money. They're focused on existing and functioning. They don't necessarily consider the details of these things because, they're focused on the bottom line all the time. But these things can significantly impact your business.
And can you speak to why, and I know, but why is that a liability? So, or give a scenario of what could happen that can make that such a liable type of situation.
Oh, I thought Ann was going to chime in.
No, I'll chime in on that one. Either because way. that's because if you aren't being consistent with your employees on how you're treating the disciplinary actions, it could come back and not only cost you just unemployment, rate increases, but you could have wrongful termination lawsuits against you. You get the EEOC involved, the Employment Commission involved, and you don't want to go there because then you're opening up your business to investigations, looking at your files, seeing, and they're just not going to look at that one case. They'll go back and they'll look at even though an I-9 is not part of the investigation of a wrongful termination, that gets into a whole nother conversation of your data management and your personnel files and how you're keeping these separate. You don't want a government agency to come in and look at any of your files if you don't have to, because they can, EEOC can come in, Department of Labor, but then if they see you've got an I-9 form in there and they're seeing some either I-9s missing or they're not completed or whatever the reason be, then they can tap their friends over at the IRS and say, hey, you might want to go do an IRS audit on this company. So now you've got two government agencies coming in. So definitely documentation and consistent on how you're treating employees. And like Jonathan said, there'll be times to where if the incident was egregious enough to where you may have to skip steps of your disciplinary process or your progressive discipline. But there again, you put that in your handbooks also. Here is our disciplinary policy, and not every, you put the disclaimer in there, not every step may be followed depending on the incident that being investigated. So you want to make sure that you are being fair and consistent, and that's the right way to be. That's you know, the way to run your business, to make sure you are being fair to all your employees.
And just what I would add to that, as far you, for example, mentioning the wrongful termination lawsuit, a lot of people think because we're in Texas and the way the laws are in Texas, oh, we can just get rid of anybody at any time for anything. And we get, you know, hey, there'll be no liability. And it's like, no, you can still fall under investigation. There are still consequences to that. And there are especially consequences for inconsistency. So as Kiana, you asked for an example. If I say, okay, well, because I actually heard this in the oil field before. Somebody said, well, if someone wears the wrong color shirt to work, you can just get rid of them. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have a documented situation. You don't have any of that. You haven't followed any of those steps. And let's say hypothetically, if someone came to work one day and they had on a burnt orange shirt, and I said, well, you know, I don't really particularly, I'm not pretty privy to or in favor of burnt orange. I prefer maroon. And then I get rid of that person or something like that. There will be consequences for that in the future. So it sounds like a silly example, but it's similar to some of the things that have happened in organizations and companies where they've taken these actions and they haven't had a documented process and they haven't had a consistent approach to discipline. And then it's come back, as Ann mentioned, and there have been consequences for that, either investigation by an agency or, like you said, they group together and then you have multiple investigations going on.
And I might add that Jonathan is an Aggie, so
Oh,
it's interesting.
kindred spirit. So am I.
Oh my, we have two Aggies. I did not know that.
That's why we're so in sync.
Yeah, I'm very in sync. And
I often say it's a classic HR saying that if everyone had an Aggie ring, there'd be no reason for background checks. So, you know.
Oh boy. And I was going to piggyback on something that Ann said about you don't want a government investigating or auditing. So in our industry in senior care, it's required to get audits. They're no fun. I've never went through auditing before I got into senior care. And they literally would go through all different types of files and with a fine tooth comb. And we're required to do that to make sure that we're in compliant with the state. But if you don't have to do that with any other, the IRS, the OIG, any of those people, try to avoid it because it's not a fun ordeal. And so just a recap, talking about developing talent the best and cheapest way. I noted it's low recruiting costs, it's simpler and quicker to bring an internal hire up to speed versus hiring a new person. And then you'll have a more loyal and engaged workforce. So we see that very, very important. So a lot of these subjects really kind of run together, but specifically talking about talent management, what is that and why is that important?
Well, I think one of the things with managing that is, number one, I mean, we right now especially, I mean, how many of you have seen help wanted signs out everywhere? Granted, unemployment and the stimulus package didn't further people wanting to come to work because they had the extra stimulus money, but for Texas, that's ending June 26th, and so that extra $300 stimulus won't be coming. So hopefully you'll see people more engaged to start interviewing and get back to work. But I think having a good talent management program and monitoring these trends enables you to get ahead of the game and get ahead of your competition, to where the workforce trying to get people into work now, you're really having to beef up your wages, you're beefing up your perks. And so I think one of the things is being competitive and staying one jump ahead of your competition on getting good talent into your business.
Anything you'd like to add, Jonathan?
That captures a lot of it. There's been a phrase going around for a while now, the war for talent, in terms of organizations trying to compete for talent, compete for the highest performing folks, the most experienced, the most engaged. And so they throw these things out there, and they may throw out their perks and their different things as far as to attract that talent. But once that individual enters the organization, some organizations don't capture or have a full understanding of exactly what talents an employee possesses. They'll say, okay, well, we see this particular person as an analyst or as a clerk or as an operator or whatever it may be. And they might not realize that this individual, they've studied blockchain a lot on their spare time. They're very aware of that. Or they have some skills around learning and development, or they're very interested in some legal aspect of the business. So with the talent management aspect, many organizations are not taking stock of what they actually have already in their fold. And they're missing out on achieving some strategic objectives or even adding some features or business development aspects to their business by not doing that, because they don't know what their employees are capable of. And I mean, as Ann mentioned, you have a lot of companies right now trying to rebound or bounce back from the pandemic situation, and they're looking for talent. They're looking for people, but it's a challenge with applicant tracking systems, with the approaches of, capturing or bringing employees to organizations now, because for one particular role, the company might get 400 or 500 resumes, so they're trying to figure out how to navigate that, how to write their job descriptions or do their job task analysis in a way where it captures exactly what they need. They have a number of challenges around that. And then once that individual joins their organization, understanding what they can do and how to fully grow or enhance what they do. So it's a number of different things to navigate when doing that. But as already mentioned, it's a very important part of attracting and retaining and developing employees.
Yeah, as
And
somebody
what,
who,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I
Go
would say
ahead.
one thing I wanted to tap on to what Jonathan said too is talking about, the untapped talent that your employees have. And I think one of those things which kind of leads into a company, and you're seeing a lot of companies now looking to do some corporate social responsibility, for lack of a better term, getting, the generation coming into the workforce now are very much want to give back to the community. They may not necessarily want to do it on their own time individually. So they're looking for companies that have a social responsibility program. And so, as Jonathan was talking about, getting to know your employees and what are the talents they have, you may have someone, if a company is looking to expand a program and working into the community on a voluntary basis or for nonprofit, you may have an employee that does a lot of work in a nonprofit in their off time that could bring that information to the company. And that now you've got a corporate sponsorship for a nonprofit giving back to the community. The company's getting that recognition in the community, and the employees is getting that that feel good feeling that they're working for a company and they're able to contribute to the community through their employer. So it's kind of a win-win, the company, the employee, and the community win in a case like that. So tapping into that talent and getting to know your employees and what their interests are is definitely a good thing for the company to know also.
Yeah, and we that reminds me when you said that, Anne, of one of our newest hires, Morgan, and that's exactly what happened. And this month we've been focusing on Alzheimer's and dementia care, and that was something that was personal to her, and something that she had already, before she came into our organization, had already been working with the Alzheimer's Association. So she already had that connection, and so it was really nice to know that when interviewing her and bringing her on to the company. So now we can further support that effort that she's already passionate about. So further talking about talent management, if you guys haven't said it already, any key components you want to speak to as it pertains to talent management? And I wrote down here, strategic employee planning, talent acquisition and retention, performance management, learning and motivating, compensation, career development, succession planning. If y'all want to say anything on any of those.
Well, that list that you compiled, it's a number of things, and it's I can see as a manager or a business owner, you look at the list and they're like, I got to do all that. But the thing is, in defining the employee experience or what they will experience while with your organization, the truth is that planning that out starts before their start date. And you have to, if you want that experience to be productive, to be beneficial, you have to give scrutiny or significant thought to what that will look like before they join and what will they actually be doing. Even as a member of large organizations, I've seen situations where someone will join, they go through the various interview stage process, they go through everything. And then they join and they say, well, hold on now, wait a minute, what's my job description? And then they say, well, it's filed away somewhere, we'll figure it out, or it's somewhere over there. And so without giving explicit thought to what their day-to-day looks like, what the projects that they will be involved in, what you want to see this individual engaged in 90 days, 100 days, a quarter, a year from now, 3 years from now. And even if it changes, because it probably will change in the current environment we're in, without charting that out or having a plan around that, then the employee experience can significantly suffer, and also by their contributions by extension can suffer to your organization. So there, with the talent acquisition side, giving thought to that, the performance management once they come into your organization, as previously mentioned, not just having one annual review of, oh, hey, well, you didn't quite make the mark on this or that or this. If you're having consistent conversations throughout the year, the annual review wouldn't be a surprise, because there will be an understanding of where that individual is. And also having a direct discussion with them of, hey, where do you want to be? Do you see a role within this organization that you could see yourself in one day, and not feeling threatened by that? If someone says, one day I could see myself being a manager at this level, or a director at this level, or helping you grow at this level, that's showing proactive enthusiasm and wanting to contribute. So don't feel threatened by it. Look at it from a way to develop, as an opportunity for development. And so all those things you listed, go into the whole talent management aspect of things. But I think the key thing is that you have to make the effort to do it in some form or fashion. Don't think that it will just happen on its own, or the consequences of not doing it won't be felt, because eventually it will.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
don't want to, when you're bringing on the employee, I mean, and Jonathan touched upon it, it was a great explanation of all that, Jonathan. So yeah, you don't want to put your new employee, especially in a sink or swim situation, like you've hired them, now go do your job. You do have to give them some guidance initially, and you do want to check in with them, after the first 90 days. Doesn't have to be a formal performance review, but do communicate with your employees and check in with them. How's it going? Is there anything that you're missing, or anything that you need, or further explanation, or is there some training you think that you need that you didn't foresee that you needed? So it's definitely got to be a two-way street. You can't just let your employee go without checking in with them to see what needs are there and how things are going.
That just reminds me of my first job post-college. I had a sales job. I never had any formal sales training, and it was a very small company, like a 2-person company, basically. And the owner, he basically gave me the Rainmaker CD. And if you're in sales, you might have heard of the Rainmaker. And he's like, here you go. So I basically
go sell.
Go sell. I basically had to teach myself sales. So that's definite. I have Adrian on.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I wanted to allude also back to something Ann mentioned earlier about habits that have happened, or trends that have happened in the workplace now, where people are no longer staying at jobs 20, 25, 30 years, et cetera. If some of them are on the call, they might be thinking, well, when I first entered my job, I wasn't given this outline or this formal training. Someone handed me a binder, or they just handed me the stick and said, go make rain, or whatever it may be. And they may view that as, hey, this is how I did it. This is how I function. Well, keep in mind what Ann said earlier. The retention trends, or the remaining employment trends, they no longer support staying there 5, 10, 20 years and figuring things out as you go. People are moving quickly and more frequently. So without having those robust plans, they won't get acclimated as much. By the time they get to the point where they're trying to figure it out of their own, or just getting a feel for it, they're on a stage or cycle ready to move on to something else. So I think it's a critical part that connects with what she mentioned earlier in terms of how people are changing jobs these days.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Ann, did you have something to say to that?
No, I think that nailed it.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just going to say, we have Adrian on, and she's our HR generalist, and together her and Jonathan have been working with my company to totally revamp our whole training And so a lot of these things they're talking about, they're starting to have within my company, which I'm very, very appreciative to. Adrian, if you want to, you can speak to it, but I just want to say we appreciate everything that you're doing.
I appreciate to be on board. It's a true journey.
Definitely. I'm happy to have someone in my household who knows about all this, who's always talking to me about different things I can do better. So very interesting topic. All righty. So that's pretty much bringing us to the end. I know, Jonathan, you talked about some of the latest trends in talent management and just piggybacking on Ann and how people really aren't staying. And so that really just illustrates why this is very important that you initiate it before they come into the company. Really, you want to have a plan in place to really have this together because people are definitely moving around. I wrote down here employee turnover, retention, and hiring costs. They all affect the bottom line. So it's in the best interest of the small company or the business owner to invest in HR and talent development and management because it will ultimately affect your bottom line. So before we conclude, any last remarks or things that you want to say or highlight? We'll start with you, Ann.
Sure. One thing that's because we are this is more of an entrepreneur series of sessions that I just wanted to say out there. I don't want to scare anyone that might be watching now or watching later that that's looking to start a business and looking to hire their first employee. Don't be intimidated by anything we said today. This is just the nature of the business. But there are certain things as a startup that you want to put in place. And there's in fact I've worked with a lot of startups from bookkeepers and CPAs. They may be setting up a company, their financials and their payroll, and then they're talking to their client and realize, hey, you're going to have employees. Well, have you done this, this, and this? And they say no. So I actually created just a quick tip sheet for hiring your first employee. But I meant, so that's, as we talked about early on, and Kiana, I think you mentioned it, getting the Jonathans out there, or you've got Adrian in house, and or consultants such as myself. Go to someone because there are so many things that you don't know starting a company and from an HR perspective to keep yourself out of hot water. And then once you get into it, the pandemic was a prime example of the Department of Labor and the federal government passing law after law after law that the small companies had no clue that they were obligated to, such as the paid leave during the pandemic and the fact that you can get credit for your payroll taxes. The one that's still in place now is the COBRA insurance, and it's COBRA's from the federal aspect, but Texas has their own mini COBRA system. And so you want to really tap into whether you're starting your business or you are a small business and you don't have an in-house HR or training person. You want to make sure you're tapping into talent somewhere, to some source of information, so that you are staying connected to what laws are being passed, because we're in a fast-paced environment right now with the government and laws being passed that they'll slip them out there before you realize it, of some compliance that you weren't even aware you had to do.
Yeah, definitely. COVID was, last year was just crazy. Everything kept changing. We had to be on the call with lawyers and different conferences so we could just keep up with the ever-changing policies and what we needed to do to change within our organization. Jonathan, last remarks?
Really, a lot of what Ann said. I think we have a number of small business owners who are listening, and you're focused on growing your business, keeping it competitive, keeping it functioning, and navigating this HR space or being even aware of these various changes that were mentioned be challenging. And for many of you, it's a task that you don't want to take on. But for someone like Ann, this is her business. And so don't be afraid to reach out and connect and get some understanding and insight and support for that, because this is an aspect of it, as we already talked about, can come back and have some consequential effects on you in the future if we don't prepare or do these things effectively. So reach out and get that support. And one of the things that is really going on right now, as far as trends being mentioned, is you have a number of companies that are, they're either coming back where everyone's back in office, or some are going 100% remote, or some are doing the hybrid model where you come in a few days of the week, and you're out the rest of the days. And all of them are trying to figure out what is their strategy going to be going forward from a talent management perspective, from a learning and development perspective, whichever direction they choose. And that's something that we're going to be supporting quite a bit in the future as far as what are some learning interfaces, or will we have a blended learning model for some organizations or a hybrid learning model? And it will also impact the HRM, or the human resource management side of things that Ann does. So if you need help for these things, reach out to people, reach out to your resources, to your connect that can help you do this, so that this doesn't feel like an insurmountable task, but it feels like another part of your business that you're handling or making sure is covered, as opposed to being something that could really hurt you down the line.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. So if anybody wants to contact either one of you for a consulting, training and development, HR, can you, Cheryl, can we make sure, can you put your information in the chat, and Cheryl will post it to the Facebook feed as well. Thank you so much. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Our topic next month will really kind of go into this topic, and I know it was kind of mentioned. Our topic for next month is recruiting. We're going to look at assessments, tools, motivators, and we know that recruitment is a big topic. It's huge in my industry, but it's a big thing that people are looking at kind of all over. People need employees. We know there'll be a lot more after June 26th here locally within Texas. A lot more people will be back in the workforce, but it really goes hand in hand with our topics of what we're talking about today. So what type of recruiting tools that we need to have in place? So definitely want to invite you to join us, and we'll have the flyer and everything out in a few weeks for that. And just to recap before we leave, our next meetings for the rest of the year, the next one is going to be after recruiting, understanding the difference in sales and marketing. The next one after that is business owner, employee health and wellness, finance, wealth development, both on the business and personal side, philanthropy, community impact. And then the last one, which will be in December, is on business planning, success and numbers. So how we can get prepared for 2022. And we'll talk about KPI and budgeting. All righty. So thank you, everyone. And we will give you back your Friday. Have a good day.